Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. You guys requested this one, a crash course in antibiotics.
Oh, this will be good.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, I think.
Yeah.
When I was reading through the stuff you sent, it's like, you don't really think about it, you just kind of pop a pill.
Right.
But the stuff that's going on in your body is, like, wild.
It's true. I mean, you're basically waging a war at a microscopic level.
Exactly. So we'll go over kind of the basics of how these things work, but
Right.
then we'll get into the really interesting stuff, the risks involved,
Oh, yeah.
and how they differ between the different classes. So
Right.
we're looking at aminoglycosides, cephalosporins, carbapenems,
Mm-hmm.
fluoroquinolones, penicillins, the classic sulfonamides, and tetracyclines.
It's a mouthful.
It is. So we'll take it slow. So jumping right in with aminoglycosides.
Okay.
These guys are like the heavy hitters. And the source doesn't really sugarcoat it. They say straight up, irreversible hearing loss,
Mm-hmm.
potential for kidney damage.
Yeah, they don't mess around.
Serious stuff.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. I mean, the way they work is pretty intense.
Yeah?
So picture this. Tiny little saboteurs, right? They sneak into bacteria and mess up their protein production.
Oh, sneaky.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Sometimes those saboteurs, they get a little too enthusiastic and they start messing with your cells, too.
Oh,
Especially in those sensitive areas like the ears and the kidneys.
makes sense, yeah. And it's not just deafness we're talking about.
Right.
The source goes into some other neurological effects like balance issues, numbness,
Yeah.
even personality changes.
Wow.
Like it's almost like, sci-fi, the cure is as bad as the disease kind of thing.
Yeah, antibiotics are weird. They can have these really strange effects. But it just shows how complex our bodies are, You mess with one thing and it can have these ripple effects throughout the whole system.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so moving on to cephalosporins,
Right?
which are kind of like penicillin's cousins,
Yeah, I like that.
but they've expanded their repertoire a little bit to target.
Those gram-negative bacteria.
Right. Think of it like levels in a video game. You've got your first generation cephalosporins are like your basic penicillin, taking care of the easy enemies. But as you level up, you encounter these tougher foes, right?
Makes sense.
And you need stronger weapons. So that's where the later generations of cephalosporins come in.
Oh, so we're leveling up, but at a cost kind of thing.
Exactly. There might be a trade-off, yeah. We'll get into the specific side effects later.
Oh, okay.
But that's a good thing to keep in mind as we go through this.
Yeah, for sure. All right, now the carbapenems, the source calls these the big guns. When things get really hairy, these are what they bring out.
Yeah, you save those for the serious infections. They're broad spectrum, which means they can take on a lot of different bacteria,
Mm-hmm.
but that also means they have a higher risk profile.
Okay.
One of the potential side effects is something called pseudomembranous colitis.
Oh, yeah. I had Google that one.
Yeah.
It's a mouthful.
It does not sound pleasant.
No, it's not. And here's the interesting part. It's not actually the carbapenem itself that's causing the problem.
Oh.
Think of your gut like a little ecosystem, right? Good bacteria, bad bacteria, everyone's living together.
Yeah, like a little community.
Right. But the carbapenem comes in and it can wipe out a lot of the good guys. And guess who steps in to take advantage of that chaos?
Uh-oh.
A nasty little bacteria called C. diff.
So it's like the antibiotic creates the perfect environment for this other thing to take over.
Exactly.
Wow, that's kind of scary.
It is. And it reminds me of what we were talking about with the aminoglycosides.
Oh, yeah?
How sometimes that powerful action can have these unintended consequences.
Yeah, like collateral damage.
Exactly.
Oh, man, this is getting deep.
It is, but it's fascinating, right?
It is. Okay, now let's talk about a name I think everyone's heard of.
Yeah.
Fluoroquinolones.
Oh, yeah. Cipro.
Cipro, that's the big one. But it's a whole class of drugs.
It is. And what they all have in common is that they mess with bacterial DNA replication. Basically, they're stopping the bacteria from making copies of themselves and spreading.
So cutting off the supply lines kind of thing.
I like that. That's a good analogy.
Thanks. But then I'm reading the side effects and I'm like, wait, what? Insomnia? Dizziness? Tendon rupture?
Yeah, they can be pretty wild.
How can one drug do all that?
Well, remember how we were talking about those saboteurs messing with protein production?
Yeah.
Fluoroquinolones, they can interfere with DNA replication in general.
Oh.
So any of your cells that are dividing rapidly, like in your gut lining or your tendons, they can be affected too.
So it's like using a chainsaw to trim a rose bush. You might get the job done,
Yeah.
but you're going to do some damage along the way.
That's a good way to put it. So, yeah, they're powerful, but doctors have to be really careful about when and how they use them.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk about the classics.
Penicillins.
Good old penicillin. I'm guessing they're included in this deep dive because even though they're like the OG antibiotics,
Yeah.
resistance is becoming a big issue.
Huge issue.
So we're like losing them.
That's right. They were revolutionary when they were first discovered, but overuse has given some bacteria the ability to fight back.
Yeah, I was reading about how some bacteria actually produce enzymes that break down the antibiotic.
It's like they're evolving in real time to outsmart us.
It's crazy. It's like they're developing their own antibiotics or something.
It was pretty wild. But for now, let's talk about what that resistance means for you.
Okay.
Remember those furry tongue side effects?
Oh, yeah, with the carbapenems?
Right. Well, penicillins can have similar impacts on your gut flora.
Oh, so it's all about that balance again.
Exactly. And antibiotics, even the classics, can disrupt that balance.
Okay, so it's not just about the bacteria we're trying to kill. It's about the whole ecosystem in there.
You got it.
Wow, this is blowing my mind.
It is fascinating, isn't it?
It is. Okay, sulfonamides. This one really threw me for a loop. The source says they work by blocking folic acid production.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wait, isn't folic acid a good thing? Like a vitamin?
It is. But bacteria need it too. They need it to grow and replicate.
So we're basically fighting bacteria by cutting off their vitamin supply.
Exactly. It's like starving them out.
That is devious. I like it. But, of course, side effects.
Of course.
Headaches, nausea, kidney damage.
All right. It's that balance again, risk versus reward.
Yeah, for sure. It makes you realize how important informed consent is.
Absolutely.
Like knowing what the potential risks are.
Mm-hmm. Even if they're rare, it's important to be aware of them.
Yeah, totally. Okay, last one for this section, tetracyclines.
Ah, yes.
And this is the one, especially for parents.
Right.
These can stain developing teeth.
Yeah, it's not great, which is why they're kind of a last resort for kids these days.
I can imagine.
It all comes down to how they work. So tetracyclines bind to calcium,
Okay.
which is crucial for building strong bones and teeth.
Right.
So if a child's teeth are still forming, the tetracycline can interfere with that process and cause discoloration.
Oh, wow.
Or even make the teeth weaker.
So it's like you're staining the building blocks while the house is still under construction.
Yeah, that's a good way to picture it.
It's kind of disturbing, honestly.
It is. It is. And on top of that, the source mentions some other weird side effects.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Like intracranial hypertension,
Okay.
which is basically pressure building up inside your skull.
Oh, that does not sound fun.
No, it's not.
All right.
But it just shows how these drugs, even though they're targeting bacteria, they can have these effects throughout your whole body.
You don't think about it.
No.
You just think, oh, antibiotics, bacteria, that's it.
Right.
But it's way more complex than that.
It is. It's a whole interaction between the drug, the bacteria, and...
Okay, so we've learned a lot. These antibiotics, they're powerful,
Yeah.
but they can also have these weird and kind of scary side effects.
It's true. But that's why it's so important to understand how they work and what those risks are.
Totally. But there's one big thing we haven't really talked about yet. Antibiotic resistance.
Oh, yeah, the big one.
That's the sequel to this bacterial blockbuster. And this time the bad guys are even tougher.
It's like a constant arms race, right? We develop a new drug, the bacteria evolve to resist it, and we have to start all over again.
So what do we do? How do we fight back against these superbugs?
That's the million-dollar question, and we're going to tackle it in the next part of our deep dive. You know, it's funny. We talk about good bacteria and bad bacteria,
Right.
but it's not really that simple, is it?
No, not at all.
It's more like our bodies are these like intricate cities.
Okay.
And all these different microbes are the citizens just trying to live their lives.
I like that. Yeah.
And then we come in with antibiotics and it's like,
boom.
yeah, demolition crew.
Yeah, exactly. Like necessary sometimes.
Right.
But definitely going to cause some chaos.
Exactly. I mean, remember those side effects we talked about?
Oh, yeah. Furry tongue, that C. diff.
Right. That's what happens when you disrupt that balance.
It's like the antibiotics clear out the good guys. And then the bad guys are like, all right, party time.
Exactly. And the source actually uses a pretty intense term for that, superinfection.
Super infections. Yeah.
It's like an infection on top of an infection. Not good.
No, not good at all. And that's where antibiotic resistance really comes into play.
Oh, yeah. That makes everything so much more complicated.
But before we get into that, can we circle back to the cephalosporins for a sec?
Sure.
We were talking about how they're like penicillin's cousins, but they've leveled up to fight those tougher bacteria.
Right, right. Like, each generation is stronger than the last.
Yeah, but I'm guessing that comes with a price.
It does. Think of it this way. As they become more potent against those gram-negative bacteria, they can also become more aggressive overall.
Yeah.
It's like they're swinging a bigger hammer.
I see.
And sometimes that can trigger a stronger response from your immune system.
So it's not just about the antibiotic itself causing damage.
Right.
It's about how our bodies react to it.
Exactly. And that immune response, it can manifest in different ways. Well, later generations of cephalosporins have a higher chance of causing what we call hypersensitivity reactions,
Okay.
which can be anything from mild rashes to like full-blown allergic responses.
So basically your body's like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah, the alarm bells are going off.
So how do doctors decide which generation is right for you?
It's a balancing act. They have to consider the type of infection, how severe it is, your medical history, any allergies you have.
So it's like a personalized approach.
It should be, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've talked about how aminoglycosides can directly damage cells,
Mm-hmm.
and cephalosporins can trigger these immune responses.
Right.
What about the carbapenems? What kind of side effects are we looking at with those?
Well, since they have that broad spectrum activity,
Yeah, hitting all kinds of bacteria.
exactly, they also have a wider range of potential side effects.
Okay, like what, besides the C. diff we talked about?
Well, nausea and vomiting are pretty common, and in some cases, they can even cause seizures.
Oh, wow. Okay. So higher stakes all around.
I would say so, yeah.
It's like the benefits have to really outweigh the risks.
Exactly, and that's why they're reserved for those really serious infections where other antibiotics haven't worked.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk about fluoroquinolones again. We talked about those crazy side effects.
Oh, yeah, the tendon rupture, the insomnia.
But what about the more common ones?
Yeah.
Like dizziness or mood changes? How does that tie back to how the drug works?
Well, remember, fluoroquinolones can affect DNA replication in your cells, too,
Yeah.
not just in bacteria.
Right.
And some of our cells are constantly dividing to keep things running smoothly.
Like,
And those cells, they tend to be concentrated in places like our gut lining.
hence the nausea,
Exactly. And in our brains.
which explains the mood changes.
Right. So it's like you're trying to target one thing, but the impact can spread further than intended.
It's like those ripples in a pond.
I like that analogy.
Thanks. It really highlights how interconnected everything is.
It does. And that's why fluoroquinolones are often considered a last resort.
When the benefits outweigh those risks.
Exactly.
Okay, let's go back to penicillins for a minute.
All right.
We talked about that furry tongue side effect.
Yeah, not a good look.
Definitely not. Are there other common reactions people should watch out for?
Well, besides the gut flora disruption, penicillins are notorious for causing allergic reactions.
Really?
Yeah, they're actually one of the most common triggers for drug allergies.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that common.
It is. And the reactions can range from mild things like rashes and itching
Okay.
to more serious issues like anaphylaxis, which is a life-threatening allergic response.
Oh, wow, that's serious.
It is. So it's definitely something to discuss with your doctor, especially if you've had any allergic reactions to medications in the past.
That's a good reminder for everyone listening.
Yeah, always pay attention to how your body reacts to any medication,
Mm-hmm.
and don't hesitate to reach out to your doctor if something seems off.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Okay, sulfonamides. Out of all the side effects listed, the one that really stuck with me was kidney damage. Yeah, that's a big one.
How does messing with folic acid end up affecting the kidneys?
It's complicated, but basically, sulfonamides can form crystals in your urine.
Crystals.
Yeah, and those crystals, they can irritate and damage the delicate structures in your kidneys.
Oh, so it's like little shards of glass in there.
Basically. Not good.
No, not good at all. It's amazing how these seemingly simple solutions can have these cascading effects.
Right, it's like a chain reaction.
Yeah, exactly. It really highlights why it's so important to understand how these drugs work and what the potential risks are.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, last stop on our side effect tour, tetracyclines.
Back to those tooth stainers.
Yeah, we talked about the tooth staining and the intracranial hypertension.
Right, the weird ones.
Yeah. But what about the more common ones? Like the source mentioned nausea and vomiting, which seems to be a pretty common theme with antibiotics in general.
Yeah, that's a good observation.
Why is that?
Well, think about it. A lot of antibiotics work by disrupting bacterial processes, right?
And where do we have a huge community of bacteria?
Guts.
Exactly. So when you mess with that population, it can throw things off balance.
And that leads to
Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, all that fun stuff.
So it's like the collateral damage of fighting the bacteria.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Like they're so good at their job that they sometimes disrupt the peace in our gut.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've learned that antibiotics are powerful, but they come with baggage.
They do. And that brings us to a critical point that the source only briefly touched on.
Antibiotic
It's
resistance.
a big one.
We've talked about how each class attacks bacteria in its own way.
Right.
But what happens when those bacteria evolve to fight back? That's when things get really scary.
Absolutely. Antibiotic resistance is a growing global threat.
Yeah, it's like these superbugs are outsmarting our best weapons.
Exactly. And it makes the risks associated with these drugs even more significant.
So what do we do? How do we even begin to tackle this?
Well, that's a conversation for the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've explored all these different antibiotic classes, how they work, the risks, the side effects.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But now it's time to face the big, scary elephant in the room.
Antibiotic resistance.
Dun, 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 dun. It's like the sequel to our bacterial blockbuster, and this time, the villains are even tougher.
It really is. I mean, we're talking about evolution in action here.
Okay, break it down for me.
So imagine you've got a population of bacteria, right? And you hit them with an antibiotic.
Boom.
Most of them are wiped out.
Okay.
But some of them, just by chance, have these little mutations in their genes.
Okay.
And those mutations might give them a slight advantage.
Like a shield or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're able to survive the antibiotic attack while all their buddies bite the dust.
So it's like survival of the fittest, but for germs.
Exactly. And those survivors, they pass on those resistance genes to their offspring.
So you've got a whole new generation of superbugs.
That's right. And the more we use antibiotics, the stronger that selective pressure becomes.
It's like we're accidentally training them to be tougher.
It's a scary thought, isn't it? And the source points out that this resistance isn't limited to just one class of antibiotics.
Right. It's not like they only develop resistance to penicillin or something.
Right. They can become resistant to multiple drugs.
Creating those, what were they called? MDROs?
Multi-drug resistant organisms, yeah.
Superbugs. Like they're immune to our usual weapons.
Exactly. And the source didn't go into too much detail about the specific mechanisms, but I know there are some bacteria that actually produce enzymes that break down antibiotics.
So it's like they're developing their own anti-antibiotics. That is wild.
It is. And some of them can even alter their own structure so the drugs can't latch on anymore.
They're like, nope, not today.
It's really remarkable how adaptable they are.
It is. But it's also kind of terrifying. So what can we do? Are we just doomed to lose these essential drugs? I mean, the source talked about penicillins becoming less effective because of this resistance.
It's a serious problem, but we're not doomed yet. There are things we can do.
Okay, like what?
Well, one of the most important things is using antibiotics more wisely.
So not just popping them for every sniffle.
Exactly. Overprescribing is a huge contributor to the problem.
Makes sense. Like if you're sick with a virus, antibiotics aren't going to do anything.
Right. They only work against bacteria.
So it's like using a sledgehammer to kill a fly?
It is. We need to be more mindful about when antibiotics are truly necessary.
Okay, so using them wisely.
Another important strategy is developing new antibiotics that target bacteria in different ways.
So it's like we need to outsmart them, come up with new strategies.
Exactly. And there's actually some really exciting research happening on alternative approaches to fighting infections.
Like what?
Well, have you ever heard of bacteriophages?
Bacteria what?
Bacteriophages, they're viruses that specifically target bacteria.
Whoa, wait, so we're using viruses to fight bacteria?
You know, it sounds crazy, right? But it
Yeah.
actually makes a lot of sense.
Okay, tell me more.
So bacteriophages are like these little assassins. They infect and kill specific bacteria without harming our own cells.
So they're like targeted missiles.
Exactly.
Huh.
And they've actually been used in some parts of the world for decades.
Wow, I had no idea. So there's hope, even with this whole resistance thing looming over us.
There is, but it requires a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
We need responsible antibiotic use, development of new drugs and therapies, and a greater understanding of how all these things interact.
This has been a wild ride. I feel like we've gone from the microscopic level
Yeah.
all the way up to these global challenges.
It's all connected.
It is. So any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that antibiotics are powerful tools, but they're not without their risks.
Hmm.
We need to use them wisely, be aware of the potential side effects,
Yeah.
and understand that antibiotic resistance is a very real threat.
A threat we can all help fight against.
Exactly.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of antibiotics, everyone. Until next time, stay curious.